Good morning, y'all. We are getting ready to go into what might be the most exciting day of the Zachary Hughes Rose Petal murder trial today, Wednesday, February 19th, because allegedly Zachary Hughes is supposed to take the stand in his own defense today. And if you are having FOMO and you want to participate and watch this case, it's not too late. I'm going to get you caught up in 15 minutes or less. For those of you who don't know me, I'm KRISTIN. I'm a tax attorney, but I used to do family law and criminal defense. Still really love true crime, love talking about it, don't love practicing it. And so I'm trying to help bring some clarity to the public and to my friends on here about the judicial process. All right, so let's get into it. Zachary Hughes is on trial in Greenville, South Carolina for the murder of Christina Parcell in October of 2021. But let me just say, the Rose Petal murder trial is insane, y'all. This case makes me feel like I should take a shower every time I read or talk about it. It's crazy. They say in the South that we all have our crazy and some of us just hide it better than others. But there's no hiding the crazy in this trial. So like I said, it's not too late if you want to join in on this crazy case. It started last week. The state rested this past Friday. There was not court on Monday due to the federal holiday. And then the defense began its case in chief yesterday in dramatic fashion. Most of the proceedings yesterday were actually off camera and not live streamed because Judge Fant has ruled that any matters conducted outside the jury's presence will not be live streamed. So here is a super quick recap if you're not familiar with the case. In this case, Christina Parcell, the victim, had a daughter with a man named John Mel, and the daughter was born in 2012. Christina and John were never married, and by the time their daughter was 3 in 2015, they already were having serious custodial issues. There have been many lawsuits, custody suits filed, and very contentious. At the time of Christina's death, she was dating a man named Bradley Post, was significantly older than her, seemed to have, a substantial amount of wealth. And the general opinion from reading background of the story was not a great, a lot of people didn't have a great opinion of Bradley Post. Post was the one who found Christina's body, and he behaved rather strangely at the crime scene and thereafter, asking if he needed an attorney, whether he could wear gloves when he was going them through the house. And then he was ultimately arrested, I think like a week later, and charged with 9 felonies. I'm going to keep this very whitewashed for YouTube, but they involved SA of a minor, CP, and production of what many of you will probably know, CSAM, child SA material, and unfortunately also a charge of buggery, which I'll go into briefly in just a second. But from here on out, I'll refer to these charges as CP or CSAM. Sickeningly, the victim, Christina Parcell, was also allegedly on some of these materials with her minor child and Mr. Post. And note that her estate is being sued because of this. There are also suits against Mr. Post, civil suits. In addition to the criminal charges, there are civil suits against Mr. Post and Christina Parcell's estate by an unrelated minor, like not the minor child, not Christina's minor child. So as a backdrop, related to the custodial, the very contentious custody case, John Mel, Christina Parcell's ex and the biological father of her daughter, had apparently suspected for many years that this was going on, and that he had tried to bring it to the attention of various guardians ad litem and law enforcement without a whole lot of success. But he was actually awarded sole custody of her in 2019. As a family law attorney, there's a whole lot of backdrop there that interests me. But for purposes of this quick recap, just know that there was a very contentious custody battle. Christina agreed to give him basically sole custody and she would just have visitation. And he took her to Italy, the daughter, I think about maybe a year prior to the murder. And that seemed to be when things really escalated leading up to the murder. So the custody battle is inextricably tied to the murder case, according to the state. And it just generally seems that that's true. To bring it full circle, when Brad handed over his phone to the state after the murder, when Brad Post handed over his phone, they discovered the CSAM on it involving the victim and her daughter and other minors. Like I said, Post was arrested, but not for the murder, on October 20th, 2021, about 7 days after the murder, and charged with these awful things, including buggery. And so I think that salacious detail has been one of the things that has generated a lot of interest in this case. There's just seemingly a lot of seedy characters and weird stuff going on. Buggery is considered a crime against morality and decency in South Carolina. And according to South Carolina law 16-15-120, quote, whoever shall commit the abominable crime of buggery, whether with mankind or with beasts, shall on conviction be guilty of a felony and be imprisoned for 5 years, or shall pay a fine of not less than $500, blah, blah, blah. So buggery is essentially an act. And in South Carolina, it's particularly a certain act with an animal. So I'll just leave that right there for you. You can see why the state would prefer that the jurors not really hear very much about dear old Mr. Post and his dalliances involving the victim and potentially her daughter. So Judge Fant, and I've done a separate video on this, but Judge Fant excluded all references of CP and CSAM from the trial. Give you a little bit of factual background on the actual murder. So it occurred on October 13th, 2021. Christina Parcell was 41 at the time, a vet technician. We did learn in testimony that she, I guess, was working part-time, but maybe had not worked in the past few weeks for whatever reason. I don't know that we ever found that out. She had a job interview that morning separately. Well, I don't know if, I guess that job maybe was the job she was applying for. We heard from the person who interviewed her, but it's not really relevant, other than for some reason she was only working part-time, and it seems like Brad Post financially assisted and perhaps significantly supported her. She was found dead in the Greenville, South Carolina home she shared with her daughter, who was 9 at the time. Her daughter was at school at the time of the murder, which will be important in terms of what the defendant offers later as his defense. And they also lived with Christina's sister, who testified for the state. I think she goes by Tina. The other notable aspect of this case, and the reason that it's often referred to, I think Fitz News actually came up with this moniker or name for the trial, the Rose Petal murders, is because there were rose petals scattered all around the crime scene. And so the media deemed it this ritualistic murder, and there was a lot of sensationalism. And then also the very unexpected profile of the suspect. Christina was stabbed over 30 times, primarily in the face, head, and neck. And I'll speak to this a bit more shortly, but the alleged suspect was a Juilliard-trained classical pianist, highly educated, and I think most importantly, at least at first, didn't seem to have any significant connection to Christina. In fact, I don't know that we've ever learned whether he had ever even met her. So to give you some background on Zach Hughes, interestingly enough, he was born in California, lived there. I don't know how, I think he was I'm guessing at this, but I don't think he was quite a teenager when his parents decided to move him and his biological brother across the country to Southwest Virginia, not West Virginia, Southwest Virginia, where I'm actually from. And so I'm interested to find out where this farm was that they moved to. But they adopted like 5 Russian children, and Zach kind of helped raise these kids. And then I guess he was homeschooled. And then at some point they moved to Greenville, South Carolina. But there's a lot there that could be unpacked. And although we don't have time for this video, but he ultimately, I think, was going to join the Marines, but had some health issues. And so he didn't pass, I think, the initial the testing. And then, as I mentioned, he was a Juilliard trained concert pianist. And we've never heard very much about how he and John Mello met, or what the nature of their relationship was, or why on earth he would be motivated to commit this crime. Perhaps we will hear about some of that today. The prosecution's case rested on several key pieces of evidence. One was DNA at the crime scene. Hughes's DNA was under the victim's fingernails. There was also surveillance footage in the form of like ring cameras that showed him allegedly entering the house and riding a bike nearby. There was some eyewitness testimony, although of arguable veracity given how long it came after the murder. Cell phone location data placing Hughes in the vicinity, and then this digital evidence in the form of WhatsApp messages and phone calls between Zach Hughes and Mello leading up to and after the murder. So the state says that Hughes committed the murder as a favor to Mello, although again, the exact nature of their relationship or arrangement was never fully established in the state's case in chief. There's no indication that Zach Hughes was paid for this. It's not like a arm's length murder for hire. Very clear that John Mello and Zach Hughes had a close relationship, but we don't really know the nature of it. There's this side issue. There are charges of harassment against Hughes and also Mello, but note, Mello has not been indicted in this case, only Hughes, which is interesting to me, particularly given that part of the prosecution's theory is that they conspired to commit this murder and that Hughes was committing it on behalf of Mello, essentially. So there were WhatsApp messages, texts, and phone calls between Mello and Hughes that the state presented to provide context and also to prove these charges of harassment because the defendant allegedly helped Mello harass Christina Parcell prior to the murder. I think in the summer months before the murder, like July-ish, by circulating these compromising nude photos of her in the mail to family, friends, and local businesses. So the defense kicked off its case in chief yesterday with the very shocking revelation. And I'll admit that in 17 years, I've rarely heard this included in an opening statement, that the defendant, Zachary Hughes, did actually kill the victim, but he had a good reason. He was defending the life of someone else, which defense of others is a legitimate affirmative defense to murder, but it's, in my experience, very rarely successfully proven. Sorry, y'all. This is my friend Finn. He likes true crime too, and apparently wants to help out right now. So I'm blanking on the guy's name, but I'm sure you guys will remember it. The subway case murder. Oh, anyway, I think he used successfully defense of others, but y'all tell me if you disagree because I didn't follow that case very closely. My point is, it's not, you don't hear about this that often in my experience, nor is it successfully argued very often. You have to basically say that the person that you were defending, you're stepping into their shoes and that they were in imminent danger. And I think that's going to be very difficult to prove imminent risk of significant bodily harm or death. I haven't looked up the South Carolina statutory definition, but the child was at school. Yeah, I don't know where they're going with this. Anyway, supposedly he's going to get on the stand today. But yesterday, when they opened their case, not very much was actually on live stream because the Judge Fant ruled that in off-camera proceedings that Zachary Hughes could not mention anything about the CP or the SA or, the CSAM. I don't know why I have a hard time with that acronym, because he had already ruled out that they would be able to bring in any of that evidence at trial, period. So even if you're getting on the stand in your own defense, you're not going to talk about it, basically, because, spoiler alert on steroids, we all now know that Zachary Hughes, allegedly his defense is that he was acting to save the minor child, Parcell and Mello's minor child, who was at school at the time. I'm certainly not saying that this child, I'm quite certain that she experienced a ungodly, horrible amount of abuse and trauma. My only point is that if we're trying to meet the statutory, requirements for the affirmative defense and defense of others, I think in almost every jurisdiction, the person that you are defending from death or, significant bodily harm would have to be physically present. And apparently was brought up by the state, and maybe Judge Fant agreed. We didn't hear these legal arguments because Judge Fant didn't allow them to be live streamed for whatever reason. It is making this case a little bit harder to cover because so much, it seems, is being held off camera. So that's unfortunate. And also interesting, given that, Judge Fant was very welcoming of the media in the case. And I don't quite understand why the legal arguments if the jury is not present or not being. Regardless, today should be a very interesting day. I'm going to try and live stream part of it, or more likely do a recap at the end of the day. We're expecting a fair amount of snow where I live, which is unusual for us. So if you want to see any of the court docs in this case and some of the related criminal cases, the link is in my Google Drive. It's in my channel bio, and I'll link it in the video description. I'm also doing a short separate video about why the legal rationale behind Judge Fan excluding the CP, because I think that's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. It's been kind of controversial, and they think, well, the jury's not really going to know all the facts and circumstances around the murder. So I'm going to do a short video about that. Thank y'all so much for hanging with me. Feel free to put questions in the comments. I also generally watch this either on Law and Crime or Pretty Lies and Alibis, Gigi's channel. She's been phenomenal in covering this. So I'll probably be on there today watching it, and hope to talk to y'all in there. Please like this video if you found it helpful at all. Subscribe, share it with others. And if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. Happy to answer. Thanks, y'all. Have a good Wednesday.